This episode is powered by Dialect Imports, taste the language of Italian terroir.
Since the beginning, actually, when I started to take over this old wine, I started to taking care of them in the way I thought it was the most responsible possible. Another thing that we didn't say before is that all around my vineyard and the Predappio appellation, there is the National Park of Foreste Casentinesi. So there's a beautiful biodiversity year around the area. Predappio is an historical appellation, so there's a lot of vines planted, but there's also a lot of other cultivations, and there's the forest really all around, which is actually giving this place a lot of potential in terms of biodiversity. So my approach was since the beginning to respect that and to try to work in a way that could just improve the quality of the soil, improve the quality of the plants that I took over.
Fascinating people with stories to share, fabulous wines and the best local foods to accompany them, and beautiful places to discover and visit. All of this and more on Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast. Join me for a new episode every Tuesday. Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Today's show takes us to the Romagna part of Emilia-Romagna, to Predappio, a wine commune nestled in the folds of the Apennine Mountains not far from the Adriatic Sea, to meet my guest, Chiara Condello, who both works with her family in the Condé winery as well as runs her own Chiara Condello winery, both located in Predappio. Buongiorno, Chiara. How are you today?
Buongiorno. I'm very well, thank you. Hope the same.
Yeah, I'm very well too, thank you. It must be something of relief and satisfaction that your harvest is now over.
Absolutely. When you have all the grapes safely in the cellar, it's really a very deep kind of relief. You know that all your work that you have done for 1 year now is safe in the cellar. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a very good feeling, but I'm sure there's also much work going on in the cellar over these weeks too.
A lot. Now we are really in the cellar almost day and night because we are doing pumping over very frequently and we are taking care of the fermentation. So yeah, it's a very tiring but especially exciting moment of the year. So
yes, absolutely. Now, Chiara, Predappio is in the region of Emilia-Romagna, but Romagna, in fact, is very different to Emilia in every way, not least in the landscape. For our listeners who are located all over the world and who may picture the broad and mainly flat Po Valley when they think of Emilia-Romagna, can you please describe where you are?
yes, of course. So as you said, I'm in the Romagna part of the Emilia-Romagna region, and Romagna is the part of the region which is going from Bologna in the direction of the Adriatic Sea. I'm in Predappio, which is a very small village at the beginning of the Apennine Mountains. So I'm up on the hills. I see the flat part of the region on one side, but on the other side, I have all the chain of the Apennine Mountains, which are the mountains dividing Emilia-Romagna from Tuscany. So I'm up on the hills. I have all the Apennine chain on a side. I see the Adriatic Sea on the other side. And when it's really clear, I can also see the Alps in the back. But for sure, you have to picture Predappio on a very beautiful hillside of the region.
That's a beautiful description, Chiara, and I've been to Predappio. I've been in the Romagna wine hills, and it is a very special, very beautiful place. And as you say, you're within sight of the Adriatic Sea. You've got the beautiful mountains behind you, and then looking across to the broader, flat Po Valley. Chiara, let's share your personal story. You went to Milan to study. You left Romagna not far to go up to Milan to study. Did you always plan to return to your home to be involved in wine?
Well, to be honest, no. When I left Predappio, when after the high school, I moved away for the university and I studied in Milan, and then I went and lived a little bit abroad between Belgium, Singapore, Australia. I was actually not imagining to come back to Predappio because, when you're young, you move away, you picture yourself in a bigger context and not coming back to a small village. So as long as I was studying economy. nothing to do with wine, even if I've been raised in a family where wine has always been the central part of the family. But at that moment of my life, I didn't thought about coming back and making wine. So I was really into what I was studying. And then after my graduation, a little bit by chance, I had a couple of spare time before starting working in consultancy, actually. I decided to come back to Predappio, where my family had a winery, an estate, just to help the family a little bit to see if they needed something. And then the 2 months make me a little bit falling in love with the place, especially the work that my dad was doing. So I decided to extend my stay to the entire summer, and then harvest time arrived. I didn't want to miss it, so I decided to extend it till harvest. And then I realized that probably I wanted to stay longer. So I decided to give the chance, and I told my dad, I'm going to stay 1 year, but don't make any ideas. I'm going to leave after the year. Yeah. And actually now it's 13 years that I'm here. So,
oh my goodness, that's a lovely story. That the roots of your family just drew you back. And I guess having been raised in a wine family, wine was something that had always been part of your family life, wine always on the table. And I guess that's such a draw to come back to this beautiful area. And you came back and began working with your father, working with your family on the Condé estate. Tell us about this family winery. Tell us, what are you doing there now?
So Condé Estate is the estate that has been established by my father here in Predappio, and it's a beautiful estate where we produce wine as main work, but we also have a little production of olive oil, and where we put together also a relais. So there's also the hospitality. Borgo Condé is a relais that my dad has created in more than 20 years of work, just taking over the ancient villas that were in the property and rebuilding the main Borgo, so that we can also have a guest in the family estate. It is a very beautiful relais, but my part of the work in the family estate is more linked to the wine production. So I'm helping in the family in vineyards and cellar.
Okay, so Chiara, Predappio and where you are is really the land of Sangiovese, Romagna Sangiovese, which is the same grape essentially as the Sangiovese from Tuscany, of course, but it has its own character. Is that right? Tell us about Sangiovese, which is both the grape for the Condé wines as well as for the wines you're making at the Chiara Condello winery.
Yeah, exactly. So Sangiovese is our deep love. Sangiovese is the variety which is the main variety in Predappio historically, and it is also the only variety that we can use to have the appellation Predappio. This is very important because for us, Sangiovese is really the variety that express the place. And what it is really important is the fact that it is the same Sangiovese that many people know because it's well known also in Tuscany and in other regions of Italy. The Sangiovese that we grow in here is the native kind of Sangiovese di Predappio, which is a Sangiovese piccolo, so smaller kind of Sangiovese. Smaller bunches, smaller berries, a little bit more skin to juice. It is a Sangiovese with its own characteristic that if I have to really sum up shortly, it can be described as a Sangiovese that is very fruity, very elegant, and with a beautiful potential for aging.
That's very important to distinguish that Romagna Sangiovese has a character completely of its own, unique to the terroir. Terroir that was formed by an ancient sea millions of years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, that's extremely right. So where I am located in Predappio, we can still really see the presence of this ancient sea from the Pliocene era, because 3 million years ago, where I am, the hills of Predappio were below the sea level. And we can see that very well in my vineyards through the rock, which is called the spungone, which is a rock made of shells and corals and sand, all compacted by calcar. And this rock is really what is giving some unicity to the parcel where it is present.
Okay, so that chalky sedimentary subsoil formed by the sea with fossils and...
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, something that Sangiovese loves. Chiara, can you identify maybe one or two wines from Condé that are really flagships of the range before we focus on your own wines and your own project.
Yes, absolutely. So let's do like this. To be fair with my parents, I'll highlight the two wines that they love more. So I talk about the rosé, which is a rosé made from Sangiovese that my mom wanted and that we produce for many years now, which is a very easy drinking, fresh but very mineral rosé that we make from Sangiovese, that my mom wanted because she's a French teacher. She loves the south of France and Provence, and she had the idea of making a rosé many years ago when rosé was in Italy still not so popular. And we started making rosé since the beginning with a lot of care in the vineyards, on the sorting table, in the cellar, in the vinification process, just to give my mom the best rosé possible.
What is that wine called?
Condé rosé.
Condé
Very
rosé. Okay.
simple. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I think that the other wine that we really have to mention is Raggio Brusa. Raggio Brusa is a cru, is a single vineyard which is planted on the Spungone soil. And it is an historical cru of Predappio. So it's a vineyard with the mention Vigna in etichetta because it's a very historical cru from Predappio, and that my dad was able to rebuy by the different previous owners. So today he is a monopoly of my family. And it is a cru that is really expressing Predappio for me at its best in terms of complexity of Sangiovese, but at the same time in terms of elegance of Sangiovese.
Okay, those are two great descriptions of Condé wines that I'm sure our listeners will seek to find if they're available where they are. But I'd like to turn now to your own project. I'm wondering, Chiara, if you didn't originally think you were going to return to the family wine estate, you thought you might be doing other things, but you did, and your family were making beautiful wines, but you wanted to do something on your own as well. Is that what happened? And how did your project begin?
So, as some other things in my life, it became a little bit by a matter of chance and being in the good place at the right moment, I think. And the fact is that while I was working in the family estate, in the vineyards, to help the family, I knew that one of our neighbor wanted to take out an old parcel, a 40 years old vineyard. And it was really a beautiful parcel at the top of the hill, 350 meters on blue clay, an amazing parcel, but that was, of course, not producing a lot of grape anymore. So my neighbor wanted to take it out. I wanted to take over that vineyard. My dad was just finishing the renovation of the relais, so of the hospitality part. So he didn't want to take over another vineyard. He already made a lot of investment in the estate. So since it was a parcel of 1.5 hectares, I basically decided to take it myself and just to have it as a weekend work. And then little by little, I started from that and I grew a little bit on my project. So now I have 6 hectares of vines, all in Predappio and all of Sangiovese.
Okay, so that's really, and all old vines?
Greatest part are around 50 years old, and then I have one parcel which is 25 years old. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's really, really interesting that.
So there's no family drama behind the fact that I have my own winery separated
Sure.
from.
No, not at all. But you also wanted to take on the project in your own way, working organically with a low intervention approach. Is that right?
Yeah. Since the beginning, actually, when I started to take over this old vine, I started to taking care of them in the way I thought it was the most responsible possible. Another thing that we didn't say before is that all around my vineyard and the Predappio appellation, there is the National Park of Foreste Casentinesi. So there's a beautiful biodiversity year around the area. Predappio is an historical appellation, so there's a lot of vines planted, but there's also a lot of other cultivations, and there's the forest really all around, which is actually giving this place a lot of potential in terms of biodiversity. So my approach was since the beginning to respect that and to try to work in a way that could just improve the quality of the soil, improve the quality of the plants that I took over. To be honest, also the previous owners were taking care very well of the vines.
Okay, so when you took over the vineyard, it was already being farmed in a really sustainable way. What are some
Yeah.
of the interventions that you would do in a more natural way to tend the vineyards?
So I work organic. I'm certified organic, which means that I take care of the vine just using a little bit of sulfur and copper. I put it together with that also some biodynamic preparations and some infusions that we prepare here in the winery, that are infusions that we make by herbs and flowers that we can find in the area and that we can use to do some phytotherapy to the plants, to help the plants in being strong and be healthy, like, dandelion or horsetail.
Okay, so these sort of tisanes that, do you think that the old vines are particularly receptive to this sort of care, this sort of natural approach? Because old vines are quite resistant, but need to be loved and cared for.
Yeah, I think that all the plants need to be loved and cared, and they show that back when you take care of them. Of course, what we could see is that the old vines, they showed a sort of resistance also in very special conditions. Like, in my region in 2023, we got the floods, and I could really see the reaction of the old vines compared to the younger vines. They have a better balance. They are more wise in a way.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really, really interesting. And Chiara, what about in the winemaking itself? Is your approach, again, a low intervention approach? Tell us about how you make your wines.
Yes, in the cellar, I just try to respect what I've done in the vines. So I always said that for me, the greatest part of the work, the greatest part also of the time is spent in the vineyard. In the vineyard is where I do really focus the greatest part of the effort during the year to have ripe and beautiful grape to bring into the cellar. And once you have that, what I'm doing is sorting very well. Sorting is essential. Sort in the vines, in the vineyards, and sort in the cellar the grape. And then I do vinify them in the most respectful way possible. So I do the fermentation just by indigenous yeast. I vinify by entire berry. So even what I destem, I'm not making any pigeage. So I try to vinify the entire berry to respect the skin. And then I do long maceration on skin, and the Sangiovese then needs time. So then I do long aging in the cellar, depending on the wine. So especially depending on the soil where the vineyard is planted. But I tend to do aging just in the big Slavonian oak cask, so the big traditional botti, from 1 year up to 30 months, depending on the wine. And I also use some concrete.
Okay, so a very pure approach using the yeasts present on the skin of the grapes. What does whole berry fermentation give you rather than a little bit of pressing?
So the idea is to, once you have a beautiful skin, and I go back to the fact that I grow the Sangiovese di Predappio, which is a Sangiovese piccolo, so with smaller berries, with a little bit thicker skin. When you have a beautiful skin that you bring in the cellar, the idea is to keep the skin infused with the wine for a long time without breaking it too much, without extracting in an aggressive way, but just by respecting the more possible the characteristic of the skin.
What does that do to the tannins?
Well, the idea is that the Predappio already has as a characteristic soft tannins. So we have a lot of tannins here in Predappio, but they tend to stay quite soft. And this approach is in order to respect also this aspect of the tannins, so to get softer and elegant tannins.
Okay, they sound beautiful. Can you describe, in fact, are you making two Sangiovese wines?
Yeah, 2.5.
Two and a half. Just tell us
Yes.
about your wines and about the differences between them.
So the idea is that for me is I want my wines to express the place, to be terroir driven, and to show the beautiful of Sangiovese, which is a transparent variety. So the idea is that through the Sangiovese, I can really let the soil express. So I make two wines for the two different kind of soil that I have. One Sangiovese, my Predappio, is coming from old vines planted on clay. Then I have Le Lucciole, which is a single vineyard. That is a vineyard planted where the spungone, the rock that we were talking about, is present in the surface as a mother rock. And in the lowest part of the parcel, I have a suolo franco. so a very balanced kind of soil. So I do the two wines to express these two different kind of soil. The Predappio from the three old vineyards on clay, and Le Lucciole, my crew, from the single vineyard on rock. From Le Lucciole, sometimes, not every year, but sometimes I also do a little selection that I use to produce the third wine that I don't produce every year, which is called the Stralisco, and which is a selection of Le Lucciole vinified all cluster, so vinified in the ancient way that was traditional here in Predappio, and that then is aged into concrete.
Okay, so it's a range that's really working to express the particular terroirs that you have within your 6 hectares of vineyards.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and small amounts of bottles. How many bottles are you making now?
So more or less, I'm producing 38,000 bottles, of which the greatest part is Predappio, so is the Sangiovese from the old vines on clay. And then I have a smaller amount of Le Lucciole, because Le Lucciole is a parcel that is a little bit less than 1 hectare.
Now, Chiara, the Romagna Sangiovese is very much a wine to enjoy with food. Is that right? And of course, we're in Emilia-Romagna, one of the most famous regions in Italy for its food.
Yes, the Sangiovese that we produce in here is very gastronomic. It has always a beautiful acidity and a lot of fruitiness, which makes it very easy to pair with food. It's part of our tradition, as you were said. I've been raised by my grandparents, and we always had on the table a bottle of Sangiovese. It's really part of everyday meal for us.
What would be some of the really typical dishes of Romagna that would pair really well with your Sangiovese wines?
So in Romagna, we are the land of handmade pasta. We are the region where greatest part of the most famous pasta of Italy are coming from, starting from lasagne to tagliatelle, tortelli, tortellini. So for sure, I cannot skip the possible pair with pasta. And another aspect that we do have in Predappio is the presence of the white truffle. Since we are entering now the season that will open more or less in 1 week from now, I think that a very good pairing can be the tagliatelle with truffle.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know white truffles came from Predappio, from your part of the hills.
Yeah, we do have quite a lot of white truffle in here as well, yes. And also mushrooms.
Yes, the funghi porcini. Is it a good season for the mushrooms and the tartufi?
It is. Apparently, it is. I
Ah,
have a couple of guys that are helping me in the family estate in the vineyards that are also truffle hunters, and they are very excited about having the beginning of the season shortly, because they said that apparently it could be a very good vintage.
okay. And you're talking about this handmade pasta, the la sfoglia, this art of rolling out by hand on a table with a long mattarello, the sfoglia, which can be transformed magically into so many different shapes and sizes. And of course, as you said, stuffed pastas, the tortelli, tortellini, and various others.
Yeah.
So many wonderful things to eat.
Pasta for us is really a deep tradition. Just to give you an idea about how rooted it is in our families, I was telling you that I've been raised by my grandparents. My grandmother was making the fresh pasta every morning before going to work. For her, it was something part of the everyday routine to prepare the fresh pasta for the lunch.
Wow, that's amazing. What about today? Would people your age, would younger generations still have that art? Because it is an art. I've been to Casa Artusi in Forlì and learned about pasta there myself and had a go. And it's not easy for someone like me to learn this, whereas your grandmother would be doing it every day, probably from when she was very young. Do younger people still make pasta?
So we don't do it every day as our grandparents used to do. But here in the region, yes, there's still the tradition of making it. Maybe now it's more something that you do in special occasions, but it's still part of the families, to have all together preparing pasta before Christmas or for special moments in the year. So I think that it's a tradition that is still very rooted in the area. But of course, we don't make it anymore every day as it used to be before.
No, of course not. But it is amazing that that tradition is within your memory. You remember your grandmother doing that. Now, Chiara, one other question about food. The food of Romagna is different from the food of Emilia, isn't it? We're in the mountains. There's more grilled meats, lamb, foods that pair beautifully with Sangiovese. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. The food from Romagna and the food from Emilia are a little bit different. So there are some differences. And also, we have to consider that Romagna also has part of the Adriatic close by. So there's also some contamination with some seafood tradition as well. Even if here up on the hills where we are, there's a mixture of contamination between the food from the sea and the food from the mountains, from the Apennine, from Tuscany. So depending on the season, there's this mix. And of course, we are very linked, as you said, with some meat preparations, the traditional cheeses of the region. It's still part of the everyday cuisine. Yeah.
Okay. I'm imagining that wonderful seafood from the Adriatic would pair beautifully with the rosé that was made for your mother, the Condé rosé.
Absolutely. Even if, we have also some preparations that in the region are made from seafood, but that we use to pair also with lighter sort of Sangiovese, cool down a little bit in summertime. For example, one of the examples that I always comes in my mind is seppie coi piselli, which is a sort of soup made of squids and green peas with tomato sauce and big crostini, so bread very well grilled with some olive oil on top. This is a dish that it's very traditional in the area, that is as a part of richness of fat into the preparation. And this is also a dish that traditionally was paired with red Sangiovese.
A fruitier, lighter style that, as you say, you can
Exactly.
lightly chill in summer.
Exactly.
That sounds delicious. And what about the formaggio di fossa? Is that from your area?
Sì, formaggio di Fossa is from my area, and it is an important tradition here in the area. For those who doesn't know what is formaggio di Fossa, is a cheese which is aged into caves. In Predappio, we have a very special production of formaggio di Fossa because in Predappio there's the caves made where there's a lot of sulfur in the soil so that the cheese gets a very special taste, a very strong aged taste. And it is really traditional from this area.
I would imagine that's beautiful. That because the formaggio di fossa is a strong cheese that could pair beautifully with one of the richer Sangiovese wines.
Absolutely. This is one of the traditional pairing that we always suggest in here. Also with the Sangiovese, more important, a little bit more richer. Yeah.
Okay. And Chiara, just a couple of further questions. First of all, hospitality, wine hospitality with both you and with the Condé wine estate. I know there is the Borgo, which I'd like to learn a little bit more about, but what about if our listeners would like to visit you? Is that possible?
So the family estate Borgo has the hospitality, which includes also rooms for staying here. There's the osteria, the classical restaurant, and bistro, a little bit more fine cuisine. So it's always possible to come and stay because in the family estate we are open all year round with the rooms and with the hospitality. And in the family estate, they also organize everyday visits to the cellar. For myself, it's a little bit more difficult because since it's either me or Lalla, the other girl that she's helping me in everything, taking care of the people coming over, I cannot welcome people every day because I'm always in the vineyards and in the cellar. But of course, if someone wants to come, they can send me an email and with pleasure, I will try to organize the visit. The fact is that if I'm welcoming someone, I really wanted to take the time to show very well around the area, the vineyards, first of all, and then the cellar. It takes a little bit of time, but I'm happy to do that when the work allows me to do that. So harvest time is a little bit complicated, but in other moment of the year is definitely easier.
Okay, well, I'm sure that our listeners understand that and understand that your wine estate is a small artisan wine estate and you're very, very busy. But the Borgo sounds a wonderful place to experience not just the wines, but also the foods and life in these beautiful wine hills.
Yeah,
So
it
it sounds
is.
a really
It
special
is.
place.
Also because all the rooms in the Borgo, there are 19 rooms, 18 rooms in the main part of the Borgo, in the central part of the Borgo. And then there are other rooms in the villas that are all inside the family estate. But what is beautiful is that every room, when they open the windows, you have the vineyards view, you see the hills, you have a beautiful landscape. And then, of course, there's also the more leisure part. So there are pools and spa and many things to do. And as you said, we are in an amazing position because Ravenna is half an hour away, Bologna is less than 1 hour. So it's a good point also for discover really Romagna and the region.
Okay, well, that sounds wonderful, and I'm sure our listeners will be very interested to discover this area. Chiara, I've really enjoyed meeting you and learning your story, learning the story of your own project and also of the family wine estate. So thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to have the chance to share with you and with the listener a little bit my story and the story of Predappio, which is very ancient on winemaking, but that is still very alive in my wines and in the community of Predappio. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about that.
Thank you, and have a great day. Buona giornata.
Grazie, buona giornata.
We hope today's episode of Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast has transported you to somewhere special. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your pods. Likewise, you can visit us at italianwinepodcast.com. Until next time, chin chin.
This episode is powered by Dialect Imports. You can find all the wine of this winery in their portfolio.